She stared out the cafe window for a few seconds before answering, as if she were trying to find courage somewhere out there. Rain slid slowly down the glass. The movement of the street felt far away, and I was still holding my coffee cup between my hands when I said it. "You're going to make someone very happy one day." I said it smiling, as honestly as I could, because it was true. She was one of those rare women who made a room feel quieter without even speaking much. The kind who noticed when someone was tired even while pretending to be okay. The kind who remembered little details nobody else remembered. And maybe that was exactly why I never had the courage to imagine that someone like her could ever look at me differently. She lowered her eyes, ran her fingers slowly around the rim of the cup, and then answered so softly that for a second I thought I'd heard her wrong. "I wish it was you." At that moment, something inside me stopped. It wasn't like in movies. There was no music, no dramatic surprise. It was worse. It was quiet. Because sometimes the most important words in your life arrive like that, softly, almost shy, but changing everything. Before we continue this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Because stories like this aren't just about love. They're about those people who spend years believing they'll never be chosen, until someone finally looks at them for real. I met Clara without even realizing it. I think the most important people in our lives almost always arrive that way, without announcements, without impact, without that cinematic feeling everyone tries to sell. She worked at a small bookstore near my office, and I only walked in there the first time because I needed to escape the noise. The office was too crowded, phones ringing, people talking loudly, meetings, rush, and I had always been the kind of man who got tired of the world too quickly. Not because I hated people, but because it felt like everyone was constantly trying to be noticed, and I never knew how to compete with that. That afternoon, the bookstore was empty. There was only soft music playing in the background and the sound of her organizing books near the window. She was wearing an oversized gray hoodie, hair tied up carelessly, no makeup, no effort at all to attract attention. Even so, it was impossible not to notice her. She asked if I needed help. I said I just wanted a quiet place for 5 minutes. She smiled in that small way she had, almost hidden, and answered, "Then you picked the right place." I started going back there without realizing it. Sometimes I bought books, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I just sat in the little cafe in the back of the bookstore while she organized shelves. And little by little, we started talking. At first about small things, weather, traffic, books, then about bigger things, loneliness, fear, exhaustion, that strange feeling of getting older without feeling like you belong anywhere. She had a different way of listening. Today I think that's what made me stay. She didn't listen waiting for her turn to speak. She was really there, present, as if every word mattered, and that was too rare. Over time, I started noticing little things about her. She always put 2 spoonfuls of sugar in her coffee but never finished the cup. She pretended to be okay when she was sad by playing with the sleeves of her hoodie. She smiled with the corner of her mouth when she got nervous, and she always looked at me 1 second longer than normal before looking away. But I never interpreted any of that as interest. Men like me learn early not to mistake kindness for love. So I just kept those moments to myself, like someone finding small, safe places in the middle of routine. Sometimes I left work completely drained, and all it took was walking into that bookstore, hearing her say hi, seeing that tired smile, and something in my chest would slow down. One night it started raining heavily. The bookstore was already closing, and I stood near the door waiting for the rain to ease. She appeared beside me holding 2 cups of coffee, handed one to me. We stood there looking at the street in silence, and then she asked, "Have you ever felt like you've spent so much time alone that you wouldn't even know what to do if someone actually liked you?" That question hit me in a strange way, because it felt too specific, too personal. I laughed awkwardly. Every day. She stayed quiet, then nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly. That was the night I started realizing there was some hidden sadness inside her. A silent sadness. The kind a person learns to carry without making noise. She never talked directly about relationships, but sometimes she dropped little sentences, fragments. People get tired of each other too quickly these days. Or, some people only like the beginning of things. And there were moments when she looked at me like she wanted to say something, but gave up. Always gave up. So did I, because I was afraid. Not afraid of rejection. I already knew that. My fear was ruining that place, that presence, that small piece she had become in my life. So I preferred staying exactly where I was. Close, but never too close. The months passed like that. until her birthday. I only found out because I saw a small cake on the cafe counter. She was alone, no party, no one there. I asked if she was going to celebrate. She shrugged. I think we reach an age where we stop expecting too much from dates like that. That stayed echoing in me for the rest of the day. When I left work, I went back there. I bought an old book she had mentioned weeks earlier, nothing expensive, but I remembered the conversation exactly. When I handed her the package, she looked at me surprised. You remembered? I laughed. You don't talk much, so I pay attention. She stared at me silently for a few seconds, and that made me uncomfortable, because there was too much emotion in that look. She held the gift against her chest and answered, "No one pays attention to me like that." To this day, I still remember the way she said it. Softly, almost like a confession. That night, we left together. We walked slowly down the wet sidewalk, and at one point she lightly brushed against my arm, without noticing. Or maybe noticing, I didn't know. I only knew my heart reacted like that touch meant too much, but I kept pretending I didn't understand, because it was safer. It always is. Over time, she became part of my routine in a dangerous way. Dangerous because I started waiting for her, waiting for the messages, waiting for the coffees after work, waiting for those comfortable silences. And when someone starts occupying your thoughts during the empty moments of the day, you're already lost. But there was one detail. I truly believed she would never choose someone like me. Not because I thought I was terrible, but because invisible men get used to imagining they'll always just be the comfortable guy, the kind guy, the safe guy, never the chosen one. She could have any man. She was intelligent, beautiful without trying, deep. And I was just me. So I accepted that quiet place in her life until the day she disappeared. 3 days, the bookstore closed, no messages, no explanation. On the fourth day, she came back, but something was different. She looked tired, red eyes, weak smile. I asked if she was okay. She answered too quickly. "I'm fine." A lie. I knew her face well enough to notice, but I didn't push. We stayed quiet until she asked, "Have you ever liked someone at the wrong time?" My chest tightened because there was too much sadness in that question. And before I answered, she added, liking someone who doesn't even imagine it. At that moment, I almost told her. Almost. But fear won again. So I only answered, "I think most people live exactly that." She nodded and looked away. Today I think about how many times two people can love each other silently at the same time, without courage, without certainty, just waiting for an impossible sign. The next week, she casually mentioned that an ex-boyfriend had texted her, and I felt that quiet kind of jealousy. The worst kind, because it can't be shown. She watched me while stirring her coffee. "Do you think people change?" I took a few seconds before answering. Some change. Others just end up alone when they realize what they lost. She stared at me again in that strange way. Too deep. Then asked, "And you?" "What? Have you ever realized too late that you loved someone?" That completely wrecked me inside, because I was realizing it at that exact moment, every single day. But even then, I answered with a smile. "Maybe." She lowered her eyes, and I felt like I had disappointed some invisible expectation inside her. If you're still watching up to this point, comment where you're watching this story from. I always find it strange to think that somewhere in the world, someone is hearing exactly the words they needed today. The days continued, but now there was tension, a silent tension. Like both of us were tired of pretending there was nothing there. She started sending messages later at night. Random questions, pictures, book passages, short voice notes saying she remembered something I had said weeks before. And I noticed. Of course, I noticed. But there's a huge difference between noticing and believing, because believing means risking everything. One Friday, she asked me to help her close the bookstore. It felt strange. The city was quiet. It was raining again. It always rained during important moments with her. After we finished, we sat on the floor between two shelves. She looked nervous, tapping her fingers against her leg, until she asked, "Can I ask you an honest question?" "You can." She took a deep breath. "Why have you never tried anything with me?" The entire world went silent. I remember that. The silence. My inability to answer right away. Because I never imagined hearing that question. Never. I laughed awkwardly. Because you deserve someone better. She closed her eyes for a second, as if that answer had hurt. Who put that idea in your head?
I didn't answer, because men like me don't always know how to explain where that feeling of inadequacy comes from. She stared at me for a few seconds, then smiled sadly. You really have no idea.
Do you? My heart started beating faster, but I still didn't understand. Or maybe I did, and was just too afraid to accept it. That night, I left confused, and spent hours thinking about that sentence. You really have no idea, do you? The next day, I went back to the bookstore. She was organizing books near the window. Sunlight crossed the glass and lit up part of her face, and that was the moment I realized something simple. She was always happy to see me. Always, even on bad days. Even tired. Even sad. It was a small detail, but impossible to ignore once you notice it. We went for a walk after work, no destination, just walking slowly through the streets, talking about small things, until she commented, "Sometimes I
Think the worst feeling in the world is wanting to stay close to someone without knowing if it's mutual." My chest tightened again, and before I could answer, she continued, "Because you start analyzing everything, every gesture, every silence, every message." She laughed softly. "It's exhausting." I looked at her, and for the first time I started seeing the absurd possibility that maybe she was talking about me. That scared me, because hope can be terrifying when you've
gone too long without it. We stopped at a small cafe, sat near the window, and she watched people walking by outside. Then she said, "You're going to make someone very happy one day." I smiled, because I thought it was beautiful hearing that from her, but also painful. It sounded like goodbye. So I answered without thinking, "You will too." She slowly turned toward me, eyes shining in that restrained way they did whenever she was holding too much emotion inside. And then I added, "You're going to make someone very happy one day." That was when everything happened. She lowered her eyes, took a deep breath, and answered softly, "I wish it was you." There was no way to prepare for that, because for months I had trained my mind to believe the opposite, so my brain simply froze. She noticed. Of course she noticed, and immediately seemed regretful. Tried to smile, tried to move past it. Forget it, but I gently held her arm for the first time. "No." She looked at me, scared, vulnerable, and I felt something breaking inside me. Maybe years of silence, maybe the absurd idea that no one would ever choose me. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. I just never tried because I thought you'd never look at me that way. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Not dramatic tears, just too much accumulated emotion finally finding a way out. She laughed while crying. "You're such an idiot." I laughed, too, because maybe I really was. She slowly shook her head. "I spent months trying to give you signs." "I know. I think I realized too late." "You didn't." She moved her chair a little closer. "You were just scared." That completely broke me because that was exactly it. Fear. Fear of creating hope. Fear of misunderstanding. Fear of losing that safe place. But mostly, fear of believing someone could actually choose me. We stayed silent for a few seconds, just looking at each other. And there was something almost painful about that moment. Like both of us were realizing how much time we lost hiding feelings from each other. She discreetly wiped her eyes, then asked, "Do you know when I started liking you?" I shook my head. She smiled softly. "On my birthday." My heart tightened. "Because of the book?" "No." She slowly shook her head. "Because you remembered." That stayed suspended between us. Simple, but enormous. Because deep down, it wasn't about the book. It was about being seen, about someone paying attention, about emotionally existing to another person. She continued, "You always looked at me like I mattered even on the days when I couldn't feel that way about myself." I didn't know how to answer. I just stayed there, feeling my chest heavy, because no one had ever said something like that to me. No one. She smiled again, shyer now, and I thought you'd never do anything. I almost did many times. Me too. We both laughed softly, and that laugh carried relief. So much relief. Like two exhausted people after carrying feelings alone for too long. The rain started again outside, and I remember exactly the way she looked at me that night. Without hurry, without games, without distance. As if she had finally stopped hiding something. Then she asked, "Can I tell you something kind of ridiculous?" "Of course." She lowered her eyes, smiling. I always waited for you.
To walk into that bookstore. My heart failed in that instant because there are sentences that seem small, but hit places that are too deep. She continued, on the days you didn't show up, the place felt empty. I stared at her without being able to hide my emotion, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt enough, not perfect, not extraordinary, just enough, chosen, loved in that quiet and rare way that doesn't need to impress anyone. We left the cafe hours
later. The rain had eased, the streets were almost empty, and we walked side by side without saying much. But now the silence was different. Now there was peace inside it. When we reached the corner where we usually said goodbye, she stopped, looked at me for a few seconds, and asked softly, do you still think I'm going to make someone else happy one day? I smiled, stepped closer, and answered, I think you already started. She closed her eyes for a second, as if those words had gone through every defense she had, and then she hugged me, slowly, tightly, in that way that seems to say things words can't. I remember the smell of her hair mixed with rain. I remember her heart beating fast. But mostly I remember the strange feeling of finally arriving somewhere after being lost for too long. Some people enter our lives making noise. Others arrive slowly, quietly, and when you realize it, they've already become home. Months later, insecurities still existed. Of course they did. Loving someone doesn't erase years of emotional loneliness overnight. But there was one difference now. I wasn't carrying everything alone anymore. She held my hand whenever she noticed my silences becoming too deep. And little by little, I learned that being loved doesn't mean you stop being afraid. It means you no longer have to face fear alone. There was one night when we woke up unable to sleep. The entire city felt silence. She was lying against my shoulder while the faint streetlight crossed the window. And then she asked, do you want to know something I never told you? I do. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then said, the first time you walked into the bookstore, I realized you looked tired of life. I looked at her surprised. She smiled sadly. And I remember thinking that I really wanted someone to take care of you. My chest hurt at that moment because no one had ever said something like that to me. No one. She slowly ran her fingers through my hands. Then I realized I wanted to be that person. If this story touched you somehow, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Because sometimes all someone needs to hear is that there are still people capable of choosing slowly, loving with presence, and staying. That night, while she slept against me, I stared at the ceiling in silence, thinking about how many times I almost walked past the bookstore without entering, how many times I almost let fear decide everything, how many times I believed someone like her could never love me. And maybe that's what destroys quiet people the most, not the lack of love, but the belief that they'll never be chosen, except sometimes, on the other side of the table, on the other side of the silence, there's someone waiting for you to realize you've been loved for a very long time.